God dwells in you. Let us pray. Most holy and loving God, giver of all good gifts, we thank you for the gift of this incredible day. We thank you for the gift of community. We thank you for the gift of our bodies and the opportunity to use them to praise you and to do amazing things in your name. We ask you to be present with us and give us ears to hear. Help the words that we hear this day be planted in our hearts and in our bodies, be turned to action for the good of your people. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Welcome to All Saints Church and the Rector's Forum. If you are new here or visiting us this morning and would like to be kept up to date on lots and lots of events that we have here at All Saints Church, there are green contact sheets near both doors. Please take a moment to give us your contact information. There's also a welcome table on the lawn. You can pick up a red welcome bag. Has a welcome card. You can either fill it out right on the spot or take it with you and return it. It's fantastic to have you here. Want to say hello to everyone. Turn and wave at the camera. Hello to everyone who is streaming us around the country and around the world. Fantastic to have you here with us this morning, or maybe this afternoon where you are, for all we know. So good to have you here. If you are streaming, you probably know where your own restrooms are, but if you're here, you might not know where our restrooms are. And that is just right here, around the corner here to the right are the restrooms if you need to use them. At all times, we put our faith into action here at All Saints Church. And each week we pick one or two specific actions to focus our energy. This week we are writing our state senators and state assembly members, urging them to support SB 982 that is going to try to end childhood deep poverty in the CalWORKS program by setting a floor for grants at 50% of the federal poverty level. So we'd ask you to please stop by the action table by the door or on the lawn to participate in this week's action. Finally, I always say there are many, many things that keep this community of All Saints going. A huge amount of the grace of God flowing through us, incredible work and labor by the people who come into contact with this community, and also your financial generosity. If you have already made your pledge to All Saints Church, thank you. If you have already made an Easter gift to All Saints Church, thank you. If you're still wrestling with these things, we'd love to help you wrestle with it. And would love it if you would consider making a pledge or an Easter gift to All Saints Church. And so we have envelopes available for the Easter gift. We have pledge forms available, pledge cards available for your pledges. Your financial support and generosity makes a huge difference in our ability together to have life-changing ministries both in this place and out in the world. Several years ago, the All Saints Vestry passed a resolution that declared that All Saints as a congregation is prayerfully pro-choice. And I think it is one of the more important resolutions that this vestry has passed because the religious community in America has not, in general speaking, had a similar view. We are clear here at All Saints that we stand up for reproductive justice. We stand up for women's health. We stand up for the health of all people, and that is why we are absolutely thrilled to have as a ministry partner Planned Parenthood, and we have a long history of supporting Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood of Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley is a flagship organization for Planned Parenthood nationally. When we were entering the 2017 year with the incoming administration, there was serious, well-founded anxiety over whether Planned Parenthood would be able to provide the necessary and life-saving services that it does and would be able to continue in that. And I want to give you just a taste of how the response of this community, All Saints and also the wider Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley community, enabled Planned Parenthood in this area to have pretty much its best, most effective year ever. Here's what they provided. They saw more patients than ever before last year, 110,000 cycles of pills, patches, rings, IUCs, and implants, 76,000 STI tests, including HIV tests, 22,452 emergency contraception kits, a little more than 3,000 breast exams, 2,800 Pap tests, 273 cervical cancer screenings, 22 cancer diagnosis and treatments. Their online appointments increased from 20,000 to 30,000. The patient show rate increased from 69% to 76% after implementing text appointment reminders. The patient wait time for surgical abortion decreased from 3 weeks to 1 week. The average patient cycle time decreased from 86 minutes to 60 minutes. They had nearly 3,000 volunteer hours, 13,000 education and outreach contacts, an expansion of HIV prevention services. So let's hear about that. That is absolutely incredible work. And that would have been incredible work under any circumstances. It was particularly incredible work in a time when Planned Parenthood was under fire, perhaps as it has not been in its history. There is an incredible staff and incredible board at Planned Parenthood. I believe our own Juliana Serrano is still on the board. I'm looking for Juliana. She's run out to get something for Sheri. And it is also the work, as you said, of an incredible number of volunteers, many of whom come from this community. I'm looking at Juliana and say, are we ready yet? So I don't need to stretch any further. Okay, good. And so this has all come under the leadership of the CEO of Planned Parenthood of Pasadena and the San Gabriel Valley, Sheri Bonner. She is here today to talk to us about the many things that are going on, the new frontiers that are being approached by this organization. So please join me in welcoming Sheri Bonner.
It's so nice to be with you. I think I saw our board member, Ann Peterson, slip in. There she is. So, so we have a lot of intersections between All Saints Church and Planned Parenthood, for which I'm thrilled. Thank you, Rector Mike. It's nice to be with you. I have a special relationship with Mike because when my husband, Mark Mastromatteo, had cancer last year, Mike came right over. He had just come to the community, didn't really know anyone, but came over and sat with Mark and prayed and brought a prayer blanket for him. So you will forever be in my heart. Well, it's always a pleasure to be here and share with you what's happening at Planned Parenthood. The last time I was here in the Rector's Forum was right after the Women's March. Remember that, a year ago in March. I think about all the protests and the rallies that have happened in the last year. I'm sure many of you were attending any one of those justice marches along with me. A very depressing but exciting time for us as a country that we've become more activated. One of the things that I loved seeing was all the signs, the protest signs. I'm sure you did too. Very clever people out there. Signs that say, "My birth control is not my boss's business." Duh. No ban, no wall. Trans rights are human rights. Protect kids, not guns. It's striking to think that one way or another, all of the communities represented in these signs and in these marches have been targeted by our federal government over this past year. And when I think about it, I realize that all of these communities include people who rely on Planned Parenthood every single day. So when we talk about attacks on Planned Parenthood, I would ask you to consider that it's not just about funding Planned Parenthood. But yes, it's critical that Medicaid recipients be allowed to go to Planned Parenthood for their health care. And yes, Title X, which is the federal program to ensure that people have access to reproductive health care, yes, Title X must be protected for the and underinsured patients who need affordable birth control and STD treatment and cancers. And yes, women facing the decision to have an abortion, whatever the reason, need compassion and support, not judgment, suspicion, and regulatory hoops that delay their care and threaten their lives. But at Planned Parenthood Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley, we've come to understand that the well-being of our patients doesn't start and stop at the doors of our health centers. While we always sit in the place of protecting reproductive and sexual health care, we also know that reproductive rights equal human rights. We cannot turn a blind eye to the whole lives of the people who walk through our doors. If they're facing inequalities because of their gender or gender identity, because of their immigration status, because of their ethnicity or religion or income level, that's going to impact their well-being. And that impacts how we, Planned Parenthood, need to show up for them and be there for them. So what does this mean? This means joining coalitions of community advocates and empowering young leaders to address the intersectional needs of people who rely on us. This means continuing to pursue diversity, inclusion, and culture change in our organizational leadership and continuing to train our staff to serve with a multicultural lens and with humility that allows us to recognize, understand, and appreciate the differences in our patients. This means standing with our patients and our students, whether it's advocating for a fix for DACA, pushing for gun reform, or amplifying the voices of people of color, LGBTQ communities, or youth in the foster care system. So while there are specific public policy issues that directly challenge the provision of healthcare and education at Planned Parenthood, I ask you to remember that it's not just about Planned Parenthood as an organization. When the current administration or Congress attacks Planned Parenthood, what they're really doing is punishing the people who rely on us, keeping them from getting the care they need. With that in mind, I'll briefly set the stage with what specifically we are doing, we are dealing with, and we are fighting for of late. So as we all know, Congress spent an incredible amount of time last year trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act and to defund Planned Parenthood. Y'all remember? Yeah. And what they learned is that the majority of Americans don't want the government to take away their health care and absolutely don't want the government to prohibit them from receiving health care at Planned Parenthood. They learned that. We were kind of loud. But even though Congress has not been successful in passing health care legislation, we know that the anti-choice, anti-women's health care extremists are still out there and won't stop anytime soon. While the omnibus bill, which is the collective of budgets that come together to make the big federal government budget, while the omnibus bill for fiscal year 2018 was recently signed without further restrictions to abortion, it wasn't for lack of effort on their part. Now, because the midterm elections are coming up later this year, it's likely that the omnibus bill will be the last major piece of legislation that we'll see until after November. So, what are we focusing on? We are focusing at the federal level on ensuring that patients who are poor can continue to have access to Planned Parenthood as part of the Title X and Medicaid programs. Coming closer to home, you may have also heard that our California Attorney General, Javier Becerra, recently presented oral arguments before the Supreme Court to support the Reproductive Fact Act. This is California's law that requires licensed pregnancy and women's health facilities to provide notice to clients that abortion is an option. And the state has family planning programs available to eligible women. Seems like a crazy thing to even have to be talking about. Why? Because women were being misled and continue to be misled about the options available to them and the type of services that these facilities are licensed for. So this law, which we had to make, was enacted to ensure transparency for women in search of their medical options. You can imagine a woman going into a clinic that says free pregnancy tests, goes in, she's pregnant, she isn't told about all of her options, only told about continuing the pregnancy, and is told that abortion leads to breast cancer. These are the things that happen in these, what we call crisis pregnancy centers is what we call them. So we filed an amicus brief, which is a friend of the court brief in this case, Planned Parenthood did, and we expect the Supreme Court to rule later this year, so we'll be watching for that. The other big issue of concern at the federal level are the appointments of judges. I'm sure you've been watching that. And key administrative positions, because they hold a lot of power. In particular, the administration wants to appoint Wendy Vitter to the federal bench. This is a person who built a career on an out-of-touch, ideological, anti-abortion agenda, and she would become a federal judge. We must keep in touch with our US senators to ensure that they oppose this and other dangerous appointments. And finally, at the state level, in many ways, I think you all know that we're fortunate here in California because the majority in California's government understands that Planned Parenthood is often the sole medical provider for the 800,000 Medi-Cal patients every year. That said, we still have challenges facing us. We must stabilize Medi-Cal rates in California to ensure that our most vulnerable communities continue to receive the health care that they need. As an extension of this effort, we are proud to support SB 974, which extends Medi-Cal coverage to everyone, regardless of their immigration status. And as long as the current White House and Congress are in place, we need California's leaders to continue being creative and proactive in protecting Californians from the impacts of the federal government. So this is a general overview on what we're focusing on right now, and I'm looking forward to diving into our discussion. Thank you.
I think these are on, so you can sit down and grab that. So, yeah, thank you, Sheri, and thanks for letting us know what you've been up to and what's going on right now. Just to start off, one of the things that jumps out at me is here in Pasadena, probably most of the legislators that we're working with are already fairly staunch allies of Planned Parenthood. And while we do need to support them, there's a lot of work to be done in other places. As an Episcopal church, we're part of a larger diocese of Los Angeles that includes a lot more than just the San Gabriel Valley. It includes many other areas, particularly Orange County, that may have a lot of people who aren't supporters of Planned Parenthood. What's some of the work that you think a church like All Saints can do working with maybe perhaps some sister congregations or other parts of the diocese? How is your job different from the director of Planned Parenthood of Orange County? How can we help in areas that are beyond just this area?
Yeah, well, I think what you're speaking to is the fact that we have to collaborate and we have to put our efforts where the need is. And so from that perspective, we recently started a political organization that is a 501c4 called Planned Parenthood Advocates. And it is actually working together with other 501c4s that are Planned Parenthood political groups in the state. That includes Orange County. So we know there's a lot happening in Orange County right now. Probably some of you are involved in some of those races. And we actually can send people to Orange County. So the fact that we understand what's happening statewide and understand the impact of that leads to this collaboration, which it sounds like that's what you're doing too, which is putting the work where the work is needed.
Right. It's actually something that came up when we had our young people in Adam Schiff's office in Washington, and the staffers that we talked to said, you know, one of the most effective things that you can do is to go to other areas where we actually have people that need converting, and do that kind of work. So how would people get involved with the 501c4?
We have here, over my left shoulder, a sign-up sheet, which that is the best way. It allows you then to find out what is happening. You would be emailed what the opportunities are, whether they're volunteer opportunities or organizing opportunities. I mean, those are the main ways, and how we're able to sort of collect that and get the word out is really through our list, so that we can keep people notified of what those opportunities are. I think you mentioned young people. A few years ago, we started a program called the Peer Advocates Program. And this is a group of high school students from all different school districts across the San Gabriel Valley, public and private. And they are steeped in sexuality education, and their work is to advocate, put forth some kind of initiative, a project that allows them to start to build their muscle in organizing. So they'll learn how to do phone banking, they'll learn how to go before the school board. And we have seen remarkable things from these young people. I think we're all starting to realize what our young people are capable of today. But this is our next generation, and we're really proud of them, and I have such high hopes for this next generation. And our research at Planned Parenthood indicates that they are truly activists. They are people who are going to fight for social justice. So that's what keeps me going every day, these young people.
So what are you hearing from them? Because we're seeing this rising up, which is phenomenal, of young people, and it's been happening for several years. And it's cutting across class lines, race lines. It's cutting across every line of young people rising up. What are you hearing from young people in terms of reproductive justice, in terms of sexual health, in terms of all the issues that you're dealing with?
Yeah. What we're hearing from them is they just don't understand. Like, why? My friends are every color, and my friends, my son told me that there was a person in his high school, this is several years ago, who was bisexual, and it was fine. People, in years past, that person would have been ostracized. So they just look at people as individuals and what they sort of bring to the relationship. And we have, another young woman said to me, what is this big fight over birth control or abortion? I just need to get my pap smear. It just doesn't make sense to them. And so the fact that they have this deeply held belief and lived experience that centers around rights and justice, that's really what I'm hearing from them.
One of the things that I was looking at your annual report, and a page that caught my eye was the page talking about creating a culture of consent, which is something, frankly, the church has a bad track record on. Yeah. And we have a lot of work to do with that ourselves. Can you talk about that work of creating a culture of consent and just, what does that mean across the board?
Mm-hmm. Well, in California, there was a law that was passed a couple years ago that basically says, you've heard no means no, right? Well, this law says yes means yes, that for sexual activity to occur, there has to be a yes, there has to be an affirmation, and this may come from some of these recent horrible cases of women being raped when they were unconscious. So the idea that yes means yes. So this idea of consent brings us to mostly colleges where a lot of rapes happen in the first year to be able to provide education and be in conversation with young people. And what we're finding as we're doing it is something that I think is really remarkable, which is that, young folks are starting to talk about what it means to see the cues from their partner they're engaging with that mean yes. And to me, that's a whole new place of sort of self-awareness that we're coming to that can build that culture of consent. I think we're seeing a lot of this with the Me Too movement. It's sort of going hand in hand.
Yeah, it's the idea that every human being should have authority over their own body and should be able to make decisions out of their own. This shouldn't be a radical concept. And yet it is a radical concept. And we had a gospel reading this morning, and Susan, you preached on the discounting of women's voices. There's a way that so many of the institutions and organizations in this country have been built on or have undermined this idea that every single person should have authority over their own body. And I am seeing in this generation that's rising up a challenge to that, an affirmation of that, and a challenge to those structures in a new way.
Yeah, I think when historically there have been power imbalances, mm-hmm. and so as we see more women becoming doctors, lawyers, getting into positions where they are becoming CEOs, mm-hmm. Naturally, we are going to see in our society that women are going to be able to say that I can make decisions, you can't make decisions for me, and I have full agency over my body. But there's just been a long history of women not having that kind of power in our country, and it is about power at the end of the day.
So, and so many people have been using theology, using Scripture as a weapon against organizations like Planned Parenthood, against the whole idea of women having power and authority. How do you see the opportunity for a community like All Saints and the way that we look at Scripture and the way that we do theology here? What role do we have? What do you need us to be doing?
Well, thank you for that, Mike. I speak nationally with my peers about how fortunate we are to have All Saints in our community. I think it's one of the reasons why we are so strong here. So let me just say that first. I think like anything else that this church has stood for, marriage equality, I mean, you all have shouted this from the rooftops. I think now it's time to take this on and say that we are going to ensure that women make their own decisions. And we're going to stand for that as a church, and we're going to find the scriptures that support that. because they're in there.
They're not hard to find.
Right?
So no, we need to get prayed up and studied up about this.
Prayed up, studied up, and we'd love to partner with you on that.
Fantastic. That's great. I want to open it up to you all. Questions, comments, things that you think that Sheri needs to hear. We got Jim and right over here. Either Andy or Jim.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. I'm so glad you're here and so glad that All Saints is supporting you. I have a question about how you suggest we might approach believers, because I think there are a lot of people of goodwill who are simply misinformed. They're misinformed about the science, about when human life begins, or whether something that doesn't even have brain waves for months and months can possibly be a human being. So I see a lot of bad science going on. How do you suggest dealing with people who say, this is not an issue of reproductive rights because from, at least week so-and-so, or some hold the position since conception, which is scientifically insane. But how do you respond to people who see the issue as one of two sets of rights, namely that of the fetus and that of the women? And I can handle them scientifically, but do you have any other suggestions?
Oh, that's a big challenge. I mean, there's some people there's nothing you can do. They're so ideologically bound that they aren't going to be moved. But there are many people who are maybe have a foundation of that position, but listen and read. One of the things that I like to do is talk about the fact that we don't walk in other people's shoes. That I can't make decisions for someone because it's their life, and they make those decisions. Another thing I do is talk about the fact that the science is not clear. So it's really what a woman believes as far as, when a fetus is a person. Because if you look at religions around the world, it does differ from religion to religion. So again, I think if talking about the fact that there's no science that's clear on this, and therefore a woman, whatever her faith is, makes that decision.
So I think that's actually, just to sort of jump on a little bit, one of my favorite early church theologians is Irenaeus, who said, the glory of God is a human being fully alive. And part of any of us being fully alive is having that autonomy and authority over our own bodies, being able to make decisions for ourselves. And there's this image out there, particularly of Planned Parenthood, that it's a fearful image. And it's this image of an organization that's out there like recruiting people to have abortions. And that's not what Planned Parenthood is about at all. What Planned Parenthood says is, we want this to be a viable option, a safe option. We want to empower women to have the full range of choices over their bodies, over their lives. And we want to help women make whatever choice they're going to make as well as possible, as safe as possible. We want to have every human being be that glory of God, being a human being fully alive. If you get into the muck of the science of, well, where do you draw that line, that's going to end up sort of degenerating into an argument that no wisdom is going to emerge from. But if we talk about what does it mean to have every human being come fully alive, have control over their bodies, to have that kind of autonomy and agency, and how do we help each other do that well and safely and lovingly? That's the conversation we want to have.
I think that's great, and I'm looking here at one of my sheros, Susan, and I know she's going to have something profound to say.
I don't know about profound, but I have something to say. So thank you for your question, and it's one I've gotten more. If I had $1 for every time I got that question, I wouldn't have a mortgage. So, so my answer may not work for you, but here it is. Good people of deep faith can and do read the same scriptures and come to a whole variety of conclusions about a whole variety of issues, and when life begins is one of them. But in this issue, in this moment, what matters isn't what you believe about God, but what our Constitution says about how we protect our Constitution from those beliefs. And you do not get to write your theology into our democracy. The First Amendment protects your right to believe whatever you choose. It does not allow you to use your beliefs to inflict them on other people. At this point in this country, access to safe abortion is the law of the land, and you exercise your belief by not accessing that privilege. You don't have the right to keep other people from doing that.
Jim?
Yes, I wonder if the phrase only yes means yes is a clearer representation of yes means yes and no means no, but in between, who knows? It only yes means yes is I think, the message that's trying to be achieved here. And it should be clear beyond that, that if I as a man say I have the right to have relations with anybody I want, and then I have the right to force you to carry out the consequences of that as bearer of my progeny or something, that sounds really ridiculous if I put it that way. So I think that that focus is probably worthwhile.
A great word for consent is enthusiastic. Consent should always be enthusiastic. Not just yes, but yeah!
Every time that I hear someone or some group saying, oh, well, Planned Parenthood's really bad, you know, they want everybody to have an abortion, I think this is a very, very old story. When I was teaching school in the 1970s, one of my 16-year-old students came in one day very upset that she had been volunteering at Planned Parenthood until they found out she was 16 and excused her. But one of the stories she told was this woman who came in and said, I don't know what to do. I have 2 children. This is the 3rd. I don't know what's causing this. And the people at Planned Parenthood sat her down and explained what was causing this. And the thing is, I think that the education that Planned Parenthood gives out is of utmost importance, and that should probably be stressed a great deal more than it is.
Thank you. That is at our heart. That is who we are. We are educators. We are not decision makers for people who come into our health centers. We don't tell them which contraception they should use of the 9 that are available. They get to make those decisions. 97% of the services we provide are contraception, so that women don't have babies that they don't want to have. But yes, education is critical. We have education that takes place with each patient that we see. And then we have education programs that occur out in our communities. And in fact, there was a law, the California Youth, no, go ahead, Julian, say it. California
Healthy Youth Act.
California Healthy Youth Act, CHIA as we call it, that passed a couple years ago that requires comprehensive sexuality and relationship education in all of our public schools. It's not necessarily happening, but that's what we're all about. Julianne and I, who is the head of our external affairs and education program, that's what we're about, because parents, as much as we want parents to be the educators, because it's in their home and it's their values, we know parents don't talk to their kids about sex. So we have to have ways that kids get that education so that the myths that are carried around, like you don't get pregnant on your first time or during your period or you name it, that we can present them with factual information for them to make the best decisions for their lives. Thank you for that. Stories are amazing.
I think we have time for one more, maybe two. Was there someone over here? Christina.
I really appreciate all the rational conversations, but I feel like there's a war on women in this country and that they hate us. And today I read about an Idaho candidate for lieutenant governor who also supports the death penalty for women who have abortions. That people feel free to say that in this country. I mean, I'm really to the point of, I feel like it's time to go to war. It's really, I don't know, I can have the rational conversations with relatives, and I do, but the cultural feeling in this country right now is that it's okay to hate women and to talk about killing them, and that's shocking to me. And I just, I'm through being nice and rational about it. I just think it's time to fire back.
Well,
I don't know.
Here. I couldn't agree with you more, and as much as we can talk about facts and how it makes sense, we're living, breathing, women who are trying to navigate our way through this world, and we know that Atlantic Magazine that we all, a lot of us love, hired Kevin Williamson, even though he had tweeted that women who have abortions should be executed, and they said, well, we're our journalistic integrity, we don't just base it on one tweet. Later came out, they saw podcasts where he said the same thing, and then he got fired. But the fact that he was hired by the Atlantic is deeply disturbing. But I would just say to that's why I'm in this fight. I've been doing this for 28 years. I will do it until I die. We have a network across this country where we are continuing to fight, and we have seen that we can make a difference when we all stand up together. But it is our voices, and it is this next generation. They don't understand why they would be treated differently because they are a reproductive being and have decisions to make about their reproductive lives. They see it as healthcare. So I feel very confident about the future, and I share your pain.
Well, and just to add on to that, power does not yield voluntarily. Patriarchy has been around for a long time. White supremacy has been around for a long time. When these things feel threatened, they flex their muscles, and there is a backlash, and we're seeing that right now. And so part of the opportunity for those of us who have power in this system, for those of us who are, say, straight white men, cisgender straight white men, is for us to use that power and authority to amplify, to give up the power, to share that power. It's why we did the preaching series that we did here, having women of color in the pulpit for 6 straight weeks, is to say this is how we do that, is you say, you're going to attack women, we're going to raise women up and remove any barriers to women claiming their rightful power and authority. You're going to attack immigrants, we're going to raise immigrants up. You're going to attack people of color, we're going to raise people of color up. That's what we can do as an institution of All Saints Church, and that's what all of us, to the degree that we have power and privilege, can do that in our lives. We're a little past time. Sheri, I want to thank you so much for coming. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for streaming.
Thank you for having me.
To be continued. Thank you all.